Mega Man X6. Quite possibly the most divisive entry in the Mega Man X series. It's also regarded as the worst Mega Man X game ever made. Series producer Keiji Inafune had little involvement with this one, as he originally intended to end the Mega Man X series at X5. But when he heard of the 6th entry from another division from Capcom, he expressed his confusion and frustration. And so I always planned to make Zero come back to life in the Mega Man Zero series. But then X6 comes out sooner from another division and Zero comes back to life in that. And I'm like, what's this? Now my story for Zero doesn't make any sense. Zero's been brought back to life 2 times. So not only did Keiji Inafune have to tweak the story in the sequel series, Mega Man Zero, but he also expressed remorse for the creation of Mega Man X6 as he stated that the series was going in a direction that was out of his control. Haruki Suisuju was character designer and promotional artwork illustrator. He would create both the Mavericks and the main villain of the game, Gate, who was Haruki Suisuju's favorite design and was disappointed that he wasn't used in later games. Gate was made to be a scientist and a combatant, while Hymax was made to be big and strong. Due to the events of Mega Man X5, Sigma was designed to be what was called a mess, perhaps after the beating he took from X or Zero. Similar to the Falcon and Guy armor from Mega Man X5, the Blade and Shadow armors were given similar roles. The Shadow armor was made for a stealthy approach, while the Blade armor was having the look of multiple weapons. It kinda has more of a samurai look to it. So perhaps that was the idea. One was a samurai while the other was a ninja. The development of the game was described as tight, as this game was only made within almost a year prior to the release of Mega Man X5. To complicate the development even further, Mega Man X6 was made after the release of the PlayStation 2. Not much is known of the development of Mega Man X6, but it's regarded as a rush job. This is the last Mega Man X game on the PlayStation 1, and if Mega Man X5 was considered to be the bittersweet ending to the X series, then X6 would be sour and bitter. Mega Man X6 is poorly designed, poorly translated, with mechanics that makes the overall experience infuriating. This is a result of not only a rush job, but disrespecting the producer of this series with clear intentions on what to do with it. This is a lesson of what happens when you stab someone in the back and create something that shows how out of touch someone can be. Before I rip this game a new one, I will admit that the story in Mega Man X6 is captivating. It shows the aftermath of the Eurasia Colony crashing, thus spreading the virus even further, forcing humans to live on the ground and Reploids cleaning up the mess. 3 weeks have passed since the incident and... Hold on. 3 weeks? You mean 3 years. In X's good ending, 3 years pass and X wields Zero's Z-Saber as he continues his fight against the Mavericks. This is how you can tell that someone didn't pay close attention or just tamper with something that didn't need tampering. So now, instead of 3 years, this game takes place 3 weeks. Unless the events of X6 take place during the 3 years of X's good ending in X5, which would make sense if it wasn't for Zero, whom I'll explain later on. So 3 weeks apparently pass and the humans have taken refuge underground and Reploids are on cleaning duty. A scientist known as Gate surveys the wreckage and finds a mysterious piece of debris. After analyzing the piece of metal for a week, Gate has gone mad with power and seeks to create a world only for Reploids. This is taking Iris's desire for a peaceful world only for Reploids in the worst of directions. Meanwhile, X is having a dream about Zero, who tells him that only he can protect the world and fight the Mavericks. Suddenly, Alia wakes him up and informs him of a mechanoid gone Maverick at the Eurasia crash site. X finds other hunters and fights against the Maverick, the D-1000. After destroying it, a Zero virus appears and destroys it completely. Afterwards, a Reploid named Hymax appears and deems X a threat. X was unable to hurt him and Hymax leaves unimpressed. Afterwards, another Reploid named Isaac makes an announcement regarding the dreams of Zero Reploids have been having. This is due to a virus called the Zero Nightmare, a virus that can cause confusion, malfunctions, or deletion, assuming death for Reploids. To investigate this phenomenon, 8 investigators were dispatched to 8 designated locations where nightmare effects have taken root. X also volunteers to investigate these nightmares, only to discover that these investigators are taking advantage of the situation for their own benefit. Commander Mark was resurrected to aid the investigation, but succumbed to paranoia and distrusted Reploid researchers and Maverick hunters. Rennie Turtloid was revived to serve the investigators and now serves the master that resurrected him. Ground Scaravage was resurrected to be a part of the investigation after being disposed of due to misconduct for some good old tomb raiding. Blaze Heatnix was designed to handle extreme temperatures. He was part of a disaster relief team, but due to how powerful he would devote his power to fighting. Blizzard Wolfang led the Sub-Zero Environment Land Development Team. His team was attacked by Mavericks, and only he remained. Blizzard Wolfang was wrongfully judged, and Ilya was deceived into disposing him. Shield Shodan served as a bodyguard for a laser researcher named Dr. Jim before the doctor became a Maverick and was disposed of. Shield Shodan was labeled as a Maverick because of this. Metal Shark Player was part of the recycling team that takes junk parts and reassembles them to create Reploids, including Mavericks. Metal Shark Player was later revived to be a part of the investigation. Infinity Maginian was resurrected after his arrogance of computer technology got the better of him. He constructed a giant battle Reploid named Illumina, which was hijacked by the Nightmare. When one investigator goes down, Izon suggests using Hymas to control the Reploids, but Gate dismisses this idea and orders Izon to continue his experiments on the Nightmare. Gate also asks Izon about his search for Zero, him being obsessed apparently. Once all the investigators are defeated, Gate congratulates X on his efforts and offers him a visit to his lab. It'll be fun, trust me. Inside the lab, X defeats Hymax and confronts Gate, who discloses that the origin of the Nightmare came from this piece of Zero, which contained his DNA. With the Nightmare DNA, he was able to create Hymax and resurrect the Reploids as part of the investigation. An investigation that was actually a hoax so that Reploids could be affected by the Nightmare, which Gate created by the way, so he could rule the entire Reploid race. X didn't take too kindly to Gate using Zero's DNA for malicious purposes, so he fought against Gate and defeated him. As a last resort, Gate resurrected Sigma, who nearly kills Gate and sets his sights on X. So X does what he does best and hunts down Sigma for the 6th time. Well, technically the 8th time. X-Treme 1, X-Treme 2. Also, Izon breaks down after Sigma's revival. Though the reasons were unclear, it's possible that Gate used Izon's DNA soul to resurrect Sigma, similar to the Eraser incident on Lagoose Island. Pretty awesome for X's to reference X-Treme 2. Reploids were becoming inactive due to their DNA souls being stolen. Though X's doesn't provide a concrete answer, it's possible that Gate used Izon's DNA to resurrect Sigma despite knowing that the danger that would cause. In the end, X salvaged Gate's body, though the outcome is unclear. Chances are that Gate was severely damaged by Sigma, thus he didn't survive the blast. I mean, this painful scream says it all. I like to believe that Gate did indeed perish, but X takes his body because he doesn't want to lose any more Reploids. His heart is in the right place, but I believe this is a loss he'll have to accept. Oh, and X and Alien briefly sends Zero, who's just hanging out. Oh yeah, Zero. Yeah, Zero is actually alive and well, and after X finds and fights the Zero Nightmare, Zero shows up and says that he hit himself while he repaired himself. So now Zero is back in the game in the literal sense of the word. The story now has a different perspective. In fact, the ending of the story shows Zero's point of view. To avoid any more hardship, Zero decides to seal himself away for 102 years. I appreciate Mega Man X6 providing reasons why Zero sealed himself away, but the problem with this is that it's presented way too early. As you'll see later in the Zero series, Zero not only has a new body, but he's been awakened by a scientist that basically set this utopian society, that which was called Elysium by X, up for disaster. Though this wasn't her intention, Zero now has to fight this new threat, beginning the events of the Zero series. So what X6 is presenting here is canon, but it's too soon. Despite some minor gripes I have with the story, I find Mega Man X's plot intriguing. It shows that just because the crisis has been averted doesn't mean everything has been settled. The virus is still a threat, Zero is presumed dead, X continues to fight Mavericks with the Z-Saber in hand, and just when you thought that all threats have been annihilated, wrong. Gate Arise abuses Zero's DNA for his own purposes just to force Reploids to succumb to his will. And in the end, he summons Sigma as a last resort just to ensure X's destruction. Now, initially I thought, well, reviving Sigma makes sense. The Zero virus and Sigma aren't unrelated. It was because of the battle when Sigma found Zero for the first time that set the stage for the Maverick Wars. And after Zero was analyzed, Sigma sought to awaken Zero to his real state. That's why he hired Dynamo to drop the Eurasia Colony once it was filled with the Sigma virus. Oh, and Dynamo is searching for Nightmare Souls to become strong. Kind of unfortunate that he's just in the story. It would have been great for him to play a much greater role than just looking for Nightmare Souls just because. In fact, Dynamo and Isaac could have been integrated better in the story. Dynamo because he's after Nightmare Souls to become stronger, and Isaac because he blamed Zero for the Nightmare outbreak and prompted Reploids to join the investigation. I think this story could have used some tweaks, but ultimately it shows an aftermath of a tragedy that could have destroyed the entire world. But at the same time, X's bad ending is also canon to some degree because he builds a society for humans and Reploids to coexist in harmony. This will later become a battlefield in the Zero series. So even though I praise the story of Mega Man X6, there are some cracks that need to be filled, some of which could have been cohesive. So what are some changes changes I would add to the story. Have Isar revive Zero and force him to fight X. Dynamo should be a boss after he absorbs so many Nightmare Souls and goes Maverick because of it. Gate should use the Zero Nightmare to transform into a variant of Sigma, not revive Sigma himself. And also, have the cutscene of Alien's past with Gate be revealed after X defeats Gate. Which begs the question, who exactly is Gate? Well, if X manages to collect a grand total of 3,000 Nightmare Souls before he defeats all the investigators, because in my game he did collect 3,000 souls but this cutscene never transpired, you'll learn more about the Nightmare in Alien's time with Gate as they work together in a research team. The Nightmare doesn't kill Reploids, it controls them. And when the Reploid that's infected dies, the virus remains. The one who made this virus was none other than Gate, who was Alien's colleague long ago. Alien looked up to Gate as he built some of the most advanced Reploids, perhaps too advanced. So much in fact that the boss of the research team disposed of the Reploids. What Gate really wanted was to create the ultimate Reploids. He wanted to make his own X and Zero. Reploids that were difficult to analyze, all because he was shunned and wasn't appreciated for his works or ambitions. So while Alien climbed the corporate ladder, Gate left the research team and sought revenge against Reploids who never acknowledged his ability or knowledge. He sought to create a world where only high-end Reploids reigned supreme, and the Nightmare virus would be the one source to determine who survives. It's like the robot version of natural selection. Kinda diabolic if you ask me. Gate literally caused another virus outbreak which prompted the humans to live underground and Reploids to be on cleanup duty. I give props for Gate for pushing Earth to the brink of destruction even further as an act of revenge, but this is all the more reason he should be the one to revive Zero as he wanted to create the ultimate Reploid similar to X and Zero. It's almost like how scientists who created Colonel and Iris tried to recreate the principles of X but couldn't figure it out fully. So instead of one Reploid, they created two, the Repliforce siblings. The X series has some nefarious villains before, most of which that were influenced by Sigma, but I believe Gate stands out most due to his ambitions and morality. It shows what happens when your talent is either underappreciated or just neglected. Almost like Dr. Wily, where Dr. Light's creations were far superior and generally favored, leaving Wily frustrated and proving to be the better scientist. The story is where XX shines the most, and had the cracks been filled with the tweets that I labeled earlier, the Mega Man X6 would have been on par with the writing in X4, a tragedy where humans or Reploids are equally the target. The difference here is that X4 was about independence and waging war against the Mad-Runners, while X6 is about a man who's out for revenge. I applaud X6 for showcasing the worst of the Eurasia incident and even adapting a little of the Eurasia incident as well. Someone did their homework. I just wish the actual game was just as good. Unfortunately, my praising of the story is where the positives grind to a halt because gameplay-wise, Mega Man X6 is the most frustrating, miserable, and soul-crushing experience I've ever endured. The game begins with X in the Falcon armor that's been butchered. X can no longer fight with the armor, but at least the Falcon armor now has an air dash and can charge weapons, so there's a positive at least. After the intro stage is all downhill from there, as each stage has their own method of infuriating the player. The Amazon area has these nightmare insects that rejuvenate after being destroyed. This leap of faith where you can't see the spikes and a horde of blades from nightmare insects that would no doubt be overwhelming. At least the fight against Commander Yammark isn't that bad. Constantly fire the Dragonfly drones directly at X is something I can tolerate, not just making it a bullet hell. This is a good fight that I recommend as your first pick. Just be mindful of the nightmare insects in this nasty jump right here. I wish I could like the Inami Temple. The idea of surviving the acid rain nightmare is intriguing to me, but the overall execution is a mess. At first it's tolerable as X simply needs to destroy these weather analyze cores to destroy the weather analyze, but throw X in a gauntlet filled with batons dropping bombs and men bandos blocking the path, and congratulations, you found a recipe for disaster. And keep in mind that some of the weather analyze cores can be hidden behind Reploids that X needs to rescue, which can cause contact damage. The sea attackers don't make this stage any better. Some emerge from the water and attack X directly or just hang on the water while they shoot X from afar. The shots track X's positions also, so the stage gets progressively worse, but the fight against Rainy Turtloid may not be the worst, but is not the best either. Trying to destroy the green spots in time is one part of the challenge, but the other is when Rainy Turtloid spins around the arena with his shell blade, some of which can fire his meteor rain, or he can just follow X wherever he goes. I found this fight to be motivated, yet irritating, mostly because of the mess that Rainy Turtloid can make. But once you get the hang of it, the fight becomes a bit more tolerable. Just a bit, though. The Laser Institute starts off subtle with some invisible platforms and mentors along the way, but then comes the laser puzzle where X needs to guide these lasers that fire from the nightmare lasers to these locked doors, some of which need to be reflected from these metallic devices here. Just hope the Guardians don't impede progress. Now X could just make his way to Shield Showdown, but there's also an alternate path he can take where more laser mayhem awaits. Now X needs to guide a laser that's being fired by a nightmare laser that tracks him. I like the concept of the laser puzzle, but just look at how much of a mess this is. Good thing the fight against Shield Showdown isn't that bad. Utilizing dash and crouching is key to winning this fight, and also avoiding his guard shell when he activates it. It's like if Armor Armadillo had clamshells he uses for shields, which does sound odd. Another Teleroll boss fight. What could go wrong? The Central Museum, that's what. Though I like the idea of X jumping through these transparent totem gates that transports him to a sub area, the transportation is completely random, so you'll never know where X will end up. What makes this stage a glorified miss is the swarm of nightmare viruses. These viruses are everywhere, and no matter how hard X progresses in this museum, there are always nightmare viruses everywhere he goes. It's so hard to move around, and just dealing with them is such a hassle. X is better off spamming Giga attacks just to destroy a vast majority of them. Then comes the totem gates where the main head just immediately follows X. Creepily, I might add. This is on par with the crow head from Super Mario Bros. 2, the one that follows Mario around. After that, X needs to destroy the heads of the totem gate to move on to the next floor, the last one having spikes on the floor. That's cool. Except it isn't. Ground Scavenge is kinda interesting. He starts off with this small boulder that he pushes back and forth, but then it gets bigger as the fight continues. So big in fact that X needs wire hooks just to avoid them. Don't ask me how this happens. This fight is competent, but he only poses a threat once the stone gets bigger. What did you want from a dung beetle? The bane of everyone's existence. The magma area. This is by far the worst stage in the entire game because of one thing and one thing only. The Nightmare Snake. This mechanoid has 4 weak points which need to be destroyed just to progress. There are numerous sections to traverse through where X has to avoid flamethrowers and nightmare viruses, but those are short-lived when X has to fight more nightmare snakes. After the second one, X can either go up or down, both of which result in another nightmare snake fight, which either go uphill or downhill. Afterwards, the 4th round. The worst one, because this nightmare snake tried to ram X from below while this fire is rising. This is instant kill, by the way. X does all of this with the risk of getting blindsided by nightmare viruses. I swear these things are everywhere. After that, one more nightmare snake. This one results to dipping in the fire and rising where X is. Good old contact method. Never fails. After all that misery, time for Blaze Heatniks, who manipulates fire and also resorts to rising from the fire. He also spits out fireballs and flies back and forth with no indication to speak of. He also has heatwave attacks and flies across the field as well. Man, this fight needs work. I can get behind the fireballs, but everything else? Why? Why the fire? Why using Brave Bird with no indication? And why trying to avoid his attacks in this cramped space? This fight left much to be desired. Disappointing from a Phoenix, if you ask me. Another stage I like conceptually, the Recycle Lab, is one giant crushing hazard that can be mitigated with Ride Armor as its pressure doesn't crush Ride Armor somehow. These Junkroids pose little threat, but what will be the worst obstacle in this entire stage are the Nightmare Viruses. Getting crushed means absolutely nothing to these Killjoys, as they can just as easily float in X's way as he has to rush underneath the presser. The Nightmare Viruses are just in the way and you won't have the appropriate reaction time when you just want X to progress. There's even a part where he can barely make it across before getting crushed. If these Nightmare Viruses weren't in this stage, I would honestly enjoy it so much more. But you know, that's only the first half. The second half is much worse. Take everything that transpired from the first half of the Recycle Lab and ramp it up tenfold. Now there are areas where X can barely move, where Nightmare Viruses have cheap opportunities to attack him, where if you let go of down on the D-pad, X will get crushed simply by bonking his head on the presser, but the Nightmare presser is fine at least. Just avoid the bombs and getting crushed, and X can finally escape this crushing hell. And the fight against Metal Shark player is fine as well. He embodies the characteristics of a shark and even resurrects some of the old Mavericks. He resurrects Magna Centipede and Blast Hornet when X fights him, which I can appreciate. Metal Shark player is simply alright. I'm okay with this. Now, I forgot where I read this, but I read somewhere in the trivia that Metal Shark player's name is actually mistranslated. Given how there's no letter L in the Japanese language, his name is pronounced Metal Shark Prayer. And I can see why, as he has the ability to resurrect the dead. Just something I wanted to share. I can't tell if this is legitimate or not. Oh boy, the Weapon Center. This will not be smooth sailing because of this giant mechanoid right here. This is Illumina. a giant mecha that shoots energy blasts and laser beams that scans X and shoots him. Other obstacles include the nightmare viruses, obviously, group jets, which are jets that attack in groups, and sometimes ground snipers that roll across the ground. There are two phases when fighting Illumina. The first is destroying this cable while periodically destroying any group jets. The next part is when these walls come down that shoots lasers across from each other. The best way to handle both these sections is to use Meteor Rain, assuming X has it. Afterwards is off to the worst boss fight in the entire game. Introducing Infinity Maginian. This abomination of a boss just makes a mess everywhere he goes. He leaves clones behind after sustaining enough damage that fills the entire area with these bubbles that are quite durable, shooting lasers that come from the ceiling in multiple directions, and if he keeps cloning himself, it makes the fight even more cumbersome. This fight in particular is one you don't take lightly and don't start first, not even second. Choosing this stage with this fight is a death sentence. Leave this last, I beg of you.
So, what the fuck is a Maginian?
I'm glad you asked. Maginian is derived from the Japanese word Minjinko, which means Daphnia, and a Daphnia is the common water flea. If you hate slipping and sliding all over the place, then you will hate the North Pole. It's bad enough that X can wall jump from the slippery ice terrain, but there are also nightmare ice to avoid. First they come rushing in as they just appear, but then they roll downhill on this icy terrain, making it infeasible to avoid them. This is followed by these ice blocks that fall Tetris style that X needs to use as platforms to progress. Then another wave of ice blocks, but these form a perfect row of ice blocks when they land. Then that's how the empty slot is filled. I'm assuming it's a nightmare effect. This all leads to Blizzard Wolffang, who is pretty tolerable to fight, launching chunks of ice or firing them like a Gatling gun or dashing while leaving icicles behind. That is, if he's not chasing X while leaving a trail of icicles behind. This is an alright fight. It could be improved upon, but nothing that makes me pull my hair out. If by some miracle X manages to defeat the investigators, then Gate will invite him to his laboratory. Be sure to have the high jump part in either the blade armor or the falcon armor for proper mobility and uses the weapons, because without them, X can climb this wall that's covered in spikes. If X enters the lab with no armor or the high jump part, the game might as well be soft locked and you have to reset the game or get a game over. The first part of the lab consists of spike walls, regrettably, instant kill fire, and slippery floors. Then comes the absolute worst fight alongside Infinity Maginian. This is the Mother Nightmare. This abomination of a boss fight is the main reason why I don't recommend bringing the Shadow Armor. This thing moves around so fast, it makes a mess with fighting electricity, and it even goes the opposite direction before attacking. Its speed, its attacks, this whole fight is unbearably bad. Use Metal Anchor to destroy it quickly, or X would if this thing doesn't impede him from using the charged Metal Anchor. This fight is absolutely horrid. Get rid of it. Moving on to the second part of the lab, where nightmare viruses, totem gates, ground snipers, and moving platforms are plentiful, with spikes being the cherries on top. Having survived that mess, X meets Hymax and is actually victorious this time. Using barriers to protect himself is just part of the equation in this round, and instead of just ending the stage there, it continues. After brute forcing group jets and meta wheels, X has to once again destroy weather analyzed cores. But here it's even worse, because since X has the Shadow Armor, which can air dash, this means X needs to jump dash off this block to reach the other side, because there's this wall that's impeding his progress. This is the most infamous part of the game and the main reason why air dash needs to be part of X's moveset. Now I need to either take the plunge or reset the game. Switch to either the blade armor or the falcon armor, go through that entire hellscape of a stage all over again, and find Max, who by the way needs to be stunned first in order to be attacked. Instead of just shooting him, X can only stun him with the X-Buster, and he needs special weapons to harm him. This means that Hymax is only vulnerable to special weapons, meaning that the X-Buster or the Z-Saber can't do anything. Forget about that Buster only run, because that run ends here. And when all of Hymax's barriers have been destroyed for the 5th time, he then proceeds to spam death balls for the entire rest of the fight. Don't destroy these, otherwise they'll split in 4. Hymax is a mess. But that's not all, because at the very end is another egregious boss fight, this time against Gate. Instead of just shooting him, Gate is completely immune to everything. No weapon does anything to him. Not one. The only method of attack is to destroy Gate's nightmare holes that has their own god-awful gimmick. The orange holes fire projectiles, the green holes follows where X is and resorts to contact damage, the red holes slow X down by reducing its frames, which causes input lag, the blue holes act as magnets, which pull X away from walls, and the purple holes spawn nightmare viruses. Gate can also destroy these blocks that X needs to use for footholds because there's no floor below him, not even counting the invisible one he just walks on when entering the room. What's particularly insidious about this room is that this gap is actually filled when you play Mega Man X6 on the Mega Man X Legacy Collection in Rookie Hunter mode, which is basically Baby Easy mode, meaning that this room is actually fixed in the X Legacy Collection via a handicap. This makes me hate this fight even more because this could have been fixed in the Legacy Collection, but the fight, even with the filled-in gap, is exactly the same. And when X destroys these nightmare holes, X can also get damaged himself because these holes split in both sides, at least not the hole back at Gate so that it damages him. Imagine Link bouncing back Ganondorf's energy balls with the sword, but it splits and hurts Link too. Doesn't sound fair, does it? Jesus Christ alive. So now to go after Sigma, just gotta go down this vertical hallway that's filled with spikes and ground snipers first. Then X has to fight all these investigators again. You know, instead of just fighting them as X goes deeper into the lab like he did in X1 when he went after Sigma in his fortress. After that, Sigma appears. He shoots laser beams from his mount, spawns energy balls from his body, and when hit by metal anchors, he also has a charge shot that's ripped from the Raider Killer from X2. After Sigma goes down, Hell Sigma arrives. And to be honest, I kinda like this version of Sigma. His slime monsters drop health upon being destroyed, and his attacks are devastating. A giant laser, beam attacks that come from the ground, and this projectile attacks that start small but becomes bigger and moves as fast as it catches you off guard. Though I think this fight could have been a tad better, perhaps making his attack have a small delay for better reaction time to evade. What I've experienced here isn't that soul crushing, unless you play this on extreme difficulty, which means the Sigma slimes don't drop health. And with that, that is Mega Man X6. On X's side, yeah, Zero also gets to experience as hell. All X has to do is find Nightmare Zero, give him a few strikes with the Z-Saber, and Zero comes out of hiding after he repaired himself. Zero has returned, and in complete seriousness, he kinda makes his hell show a bit more tolerable. Since he's all about close range combat, this makes encounters a bit of a breeze. I say a bit of a breeze because Zero will still face hardships along the way. So Infinity Maginian, High Max, and even Gate will still be a problem as they were before. In fact, the obstacle leading to Gate is completely different for Zero because Zero doesn't destroy any of the weather analyze cores, nor does he have to jump under this wall of doom X has to suffer through. Instead, he has to go through another presser. No, scratch that. 3 pressers, each that gets lower and lower as he goes, to the point where Zero has to wall jump between the floors. Now, this is intriguing as this is concerning because I like the idea of utilizing the ground to avoid getting crushed, but there are meta wheels, dumbbells, and group jets to fight. The group jets being the most concerning because they attack Zero at his most vulnerable. And keep in mind that if he gets attacked, he's bonking his head on the pressure, which will flatten him. Besides that, the rest of Gate's lab plays out similarly to X's side. In fact, playing as Zero and X6 merely softens the blow that X6 throws at you. The infamous parts still maintain their infamy, but when it comes to the more aggressive and versatile approach, Zero is more capable than X is. That's not to say that it's solid because a simple close quarter approach won't always be the answer. What I'm saying is that playing as Zero isn't as excruciating as X is. Zero has his double jump, his 3-hit combo, and techniques that can help him on his way. X has to heavily rely on armor and parts just to get by. Without any armor and parts, X will find himself in a position he can barely get out of, and that's one of X6's biggest issues, punishing you for being unprepared. Alright, now for weapons and techniques. I would say that X's weaponry this time around has more variety. The armor option is a good weapon to spam if X needs more shots to use, while the charge shot acts as a barrier that shoots everywhere. A reliable weapon if used properly. Meteor Rain has more emphasis on vertical movement. It can bounce off ceilings and be used to strike foes from above. The charge shot can be good for fighting multiple enemies, but this is no guarantee that it'll do the job flawlessly. I consider this weapon to be my favorite. A good vertical weapon that can be used defensively. Ground Dash is kinda weird. X conjures a boulder that moves so slowly despite X dashing to kick it off. The charge shot is a giant boulder that moves quickly, though it takes time for a brief moment. I consider this a frontal assault weapon. Though this weapon isn't that reliable due to lack of speed, the charge shot makes up for it and is great for a group of enemies in front of X. The Ray Arrow is just the laser equivalent of the Ground Hunter from Mega Man X4. It travels across the ground and climbs walls. The charge shot is 5 beams firing upward, like a Giga attack. I hardly found a use for this weapon. This may work for grounded enemies or a substitute for the Giga attack, but it's not a weapon worth going crazy for. The Metal Anchor is a bouncy metal anchor feature that's ideal for getting a good angle against enemies. The charge shot is a rain of metal storm eagles. Kind of an odd choice, but I appreciate the callback. The only problem with the charge shot is that it can be interrupted as X is trying to charge the metal anchor. One moment the metal storm eagles are there and the next they're not. The only major flaw with this weapon. This one gets an honorable mention for me. The magma blade is more of a Z-Saber weapon than something X can have. That's not to say it's bad. In fact, the magma blade is another favorite. It's the Z-Saber swing that shoots flames, and the charge shot initiates with X firing one bird-shaped fire, while a bunch of other bird-shaped fires fly across horizontally, though not as fast as the planes from the Swan Magma Blade. Ice Burst is a block of ice that shoots 3 little ones. The ice block can be stood on to have better height and footing. The charge shot is weird. While dashing, X can fire icicles out of its body. Ice Burst is a weird one, but it can be helpful when needed. Finally, the guard shell. This is supposed to be a barrier weapon, but is almost entirely useless. It's supposed to block and ricochet enemy shots, but that doesn't apply to every single enemy shot. But when it works, it can be reliable. The charge shot summons 4 shells that fire lasers that cross paths. Yeah, guard shell is not that great. But there is one trick you can try. I'll let the technical expert explain it.
It lets you do damage for every frame that your attack is in the enemy's hitbox. And what that means is basically this. As you'll notice, that killed him pretty fast. So basically for every single boss fight, well, not every single boss fight, for a majority of the bosses, that's going to be your method of killing them. You walk up to them, activate guard shell, and then slash fully, do this with guard shell on. Guard shell basically, like I said before, is it does damage for every frame that your attack is in the enemy's hitbox. So the closer you are to the enemy, the more damage it's going to do when you swing your saber through him. I would have killed him in 2 hits, however I wasn't directly in his hitbox. What I mean by that is if you're standing a little bit far away, you won't do as much damage. So the main strategy with the guard shell is to learn where to line yourself up to do the most damage that you can.
Besides the armor option in guard shell, Zero gets techniques as he usually does. Shuin-Zan is a good upper flame attack that's perfect for enemies above Zero. Insui-Zan is a crazy spin move where Zero just spins and plays with the Z-Saber. Raku Kojin is a downward thrust attack that also spawns a metal anchor, where Koha is Zero's geek attack that acts similar to the charged ray arrow, except this one moves slower and is stronger. Kyoroga is a weird ice attack where Zero jumps like X with the shadow armor, sticks to the ceiling, and swats out icicles from his Z-Saber. I didn't know how this move worked, but after seeing it, why not just have Zero shoot these icicles from his buster like a regular weapon? And then there's the Zenzui-san. Out of all the techniques in Zero's moveset, this is the most concerning. Though the description reads down and attack in midair, the input is actually up in attack in midair. Senzui-Zan is a midair dive attack, meaning that accidental inputs can happen which will plummet Zero into the deep dark abyss. I want to make you use of this move, but Zero already has better moves. Use this move cautiously because this can send Zero careening towards a pit. As for the armors, X has 3 of them, not counting the ultimate armor. Since the Falcon armor got botched, that means it doesn't perform at its best in this entry. The Falcon armor doesn't fly anymore, the spear charge shot doesn't penetrate through walls, but now X can air dash and charge special weapons. In other words, the Falcon armor is weaker and has features that it should have had in X5. The blade armor acts as another set of force armor, decreasing the amount of special weapon energy used, increasing defense and adding a geek attack, a plasma charge shot, and a blaze shot to boot, and a mock dash where X can hold his position in midair and dash in 1 of 4 directions. He also has a head barrier that can attack, but only during the initiation. Next is the shadow armor, which I honestly like. The head part increases the speed of the Z-Saber swings, the body increases defense, and the geek attack is a 3-hit saber attack that circles around X. The head part shoots shurikens that fire randomly, and the charge shot is a charged up saber attack. The leg parts allow X to do ninja jumps that allows him to stick on ceilings. He can dash once before falling. In addition, X is completely immune to spikes, but the armor can't use weapons. Besides that setback, the shadow armor is fun to use. The ninja attribute of this armor is what I enjoy most about X6. Being able to jump high towards ceilings and the stronger emphasis on the saber brings out the versatility of this armor. Despite the negativity I portrayed thus far, the biggest positive of X6 is the music. Its variety of the tone and instruments are what I remember fondly the most, some of which are soft on the ears while others are intense and filled with adrenaline. But listening is better than explaining, so have a listen for yourselves. And before someone brings it up, yes, I'm fully aware that Gates Lab is just the theme music for the third X100 stage from Mega Man X2 and the second Sigma stage from Mega Man Extreme. There's one word to describe my experience of Mega Man X6. Miserable. It confounds me how anyone could look upon their own creation and just accept how their poor craftsmanship and design decisions is acceptable. People with pulses in their minds made all of this possible, and yet they gave this the green light to be shipped out for people to suffer through this whole disgrace of a game. Though I praise the music, most of the weapons and techniques, the shadow armor, and even the aesthetics can be pleasing to the eye, the overall experience is one glorified mess. The level design, the nightmare, certain boss fights such as Infinity Maginian, Hymax, and Gate set this game back 100-fold. Almost every design aspect was so poorly made and thought out that it's absolutely baffling how anyone at the time can just be content with this. Mega Man X6 has potential to be great on its own right, but how this was made and thought out is nothing but repulsive. So what can be done to make X6 actually good? Obviously the level design needs work so that it's actually enjoyable and challenging to go through. The nightmare system needs to be not annoying and treated the same way as changing stages like in X1 and X3. X needs the air dash by default, no alternate paths. Armor pieces need to be used individually. Nightmare viruses shouldn't be cheap and not just float around wherever they please. The guard shell needs to be revamped so it's actually useful and not just to abuse hitboxes. The blade armor shouldn't be force armor 1.5. The shadow armor needs to use weapons. Hymax and Gate need to be vulnerable to everything, especially the X-Buster and the Z-Saber. Get rid of these spikes in Gates Lab. The magma area needs to be a level and not a gauntlet of nightmare snakes. In fact, the lava level from Fallen Knight is a perfect example of what the magma area should have been, avoiding lava while activating an elevator. This large gap between X and the capsule and the recycler needs to be filled. Separate the capsule and the hard tank in the weapons center. The Central Museum shouldn't be random nor have this absurd swarm of nightmare viruses. Split the second lab stage into 2 parts. Have the refight spread all in Gates Lab like in X1. Fix these typos in grammar, because if there's anything that the Mega Man franchise doesn't need, it's constant misspelling and errors in grammar. And have the origin of Gate and Alien in the story not require 3,000 nightmare souls before defeating all the investigators. You know, it's all very sad, because I can never tell if someone intentionally made the game bad on purpose or people just didn't know what they were doing. And these are answers that need to be provided. Why did X6 turn out the way that it did? What happened here? How exactly was development tight? How did anyone approve these design choices back in the day? I can't casually recommend Mega Man X6 to anyone because of how this game is made. The only reason I would consider recommending X6 is to anyone who is purely curious. If anyone wants a more tolerable X6 experience, then your best bets are the Tweak Patch and Ends Edition. The Tweak Patch allows you to change the game however you please, from level design to adjusting health for X, Zero, or the bosses, disabling nightmare effects, using armor parts individually. The Tweak offers features that should have been in the core game to begin with. Ends Edition tweaks level design and revamps the nightmare system so that it's actually an obstacle. It's not perfect, but the design is much better compared to the original game. Also, someone by the name of Cat Yard Games is reimagining X6 with better design and mechanics. Mega Man X Viral Nightmare is the game that X players, like myself, desperately need, especially when there hasn't been an X game in 20 years. No, I'm not counting Mega Man X Dive. It pains me to act this way towards Mega Man X6, but when a game is obviously poorly designed and thought out, then of course I'll call it out. There is never an excuse for such a sloppy execution, and because of that, Mega Man X6 is not only miserable, but also just disappointing. Disappointing that Capcom could just stab Keiji Inafune in the back while simultaneously creating an entry that could be a support of the X series, but said entry needs to be carefully created and well thought out. Failing that, the entry will tarnish the series and be regarded as the worst game in said series. Anyone who knows the X series series will say without hesitation that Mega Man X6 is not good, perhaps even just bad. And that's honestly a shame because despite Capcom's decision to betray Keiji Inafune, X6 could have been at least a follow-up to what Keiji had planned for the franchise moving forward. And because of the narrative decisions in X6, this means that Keiji had to go back to the drawing board for the plot of Mega Man Zero. So X6 changed the course of how the Zero series would be played out. Mega Man X6 is quite the conundrum. On one end, you have a story that reveals the aftermath of a tragedy in the actions of a madman who was underappreciated and treated unfairly, while the other end is a glorified mess that leaves people angry and depressed. Let Mega Man X6 be an educated lesson on how not to make a video game and how not to introduce game mechanics. It's not an exaggeration when people say that they hate this game, and honestly, despite the negativity, I pity it. Not only was I miserable and frustrated, but I was just disappointed afterwards. This is one experience that I will never forget. The gimmick of Mega Man X6 lives true all the way to the end. Mega Man X6 is truly a nightmare.
She's a